Thank you so much to Shanta ji and Sayyida ji for inviting me to speak. I feel honored to be among such accomplished speakers. I too was hesitant to speak today because I'm not an expert on any of these topics. But after I read Dr. Kurian's report and Maulana Azad's speeches, I was so inspired that I decided to share some of my observations for sketching actionable pathways. Before Dr. Kurian's detailed report, there was the Satchar Committee report, and before that, there was Dr. Gopal Singh's report, and they all had some excellent insights. But it looks like they were all shelved by the governments that sponsored them, as well as the Muslim organizations. We have data, we seem to have a very good idea of what the problems are. We also seem to have some great solutions and recommendations. And I sincerely hope that these challenging times will finally force us all to swing into action. I've had the opportunity to interact in a very deep way with young women from lower middle class homes while overseeing a program for an NGO. These women were between the ages of 18 to 25 years. And while this program was an all India program, I'd like to focus on the centers in Hyderabad because 30 out of the 50 centers in Hyderabad had only Muslim girls coming in there. Although we did not intend to segregate the girls on the basis of religion, it happened like it always does because of language, Telugu speaking versus Urdu speaking, and also because of the area in which the center was located. As I said, out of the 50 centers in Hyderabad, about 30 had all Muslim girls, mainly Dalits and OBCs. 18 had all Hindu, 30 had Muslim girls, 18 had Hindu girls, mainly Dalits and OBCs, and only 2 had a mix because luckily the areas in which these 2 centers were situated happened to have both Dalit and Muslim neighborhoods close by. I'll talk about my observations of these 2 mixed centers in a while, but I'll begin with what I learned in the all Muslim girl centers. Before that, let me very quickly tell you about these centers. Because they were intended for young adults, we decided not to have a structured curriculum, but to create a safe learning space where they could learn from each other. As Anita ji said just before me, we try to create these empathetic, safe, collaborative spaces where the courses were not prescriptive at all. We wanted to give these young women something that they did not get anywhere else. So things like a clean, safe, carpeted room, a proper washroom with running water, high-speed internet, devices and laptops, softwares and resources to learn English or typing, or to just surf the net and look at whatever they wanted to. Most importantly, the freedom to use their time. Like, they could even they could even come there and take a nap if that's what they wanted to do. A majority of the young women who enrolled in these centers were school and college dropouts, and others were going to some sort of a college or some sort of a coaching and very often Dini Talim. Most of these girls had either in a school or through open school completed grade 9 and grade 10. Each of these centers had about 200 to 300 girls spending about 3 hours a day, 5 or 6 times a week. So you can say that while overseeing this program, I got to interact with 8,000 Muslim girls between the ages of 18 to 25 over a 1.5-year period. These girls, these young women are part of the 31 million vulnerable and disadvantaged out of school and college youth below the age of 25 that Dr. Kurian has mentioned in his report. I tried out a few learning strategies which aimed at accelerating intellectual development, reasoning skills, empathy, problem solving and decision making, and what Maulana Azad would call a liberal and humanitarian education which could transform their outlook and set them up for success and progress. We also attempted to introduce a feminist orientation, and I'm sure Maulana Azad would have approved of that, and help build an alternative identity, or try to help young women explore the idea of having an identity other than or in addition to a Muslim identity. I'll start sharing a presentation because I want to share some photographs with you. Just come to the photographs in a minute. I'll share some observations followed by some learning strategies that we implemented with. What was very obvious from day one was that the young women who came to these centers had been exposed to a single view of what Islam is. So when you looked at these young women, the first thought that might have come to your mind is that these Muslim women had been manufactured in a factory. Every girl wore a hijab at all times, even though there were no men in the room, and many wore a burqa in addition throughout the 3 hours that they spent in a women's only room. In some of the centers, they covered more, like the face with a niqab, black socks, full socks, like tights actually. They went all the way up to your waist. And let me show you a picture here of this young woman's feet with the black socks. I decided not to, talk about these things because I was raised with liberal intellectuals. So I chose to believe that this is their choice, and at least Muslim women are coming out and studying, so we must encourage them. And maybe the burqa and the hijab is not a symbol of oppression, but a symbol of revolution. None of us really spoke about that. In one of my visits, I noticed that some of the girls had also started wearing black gloves in addition. So I decided to very gently break my silence, and very conversationally, I asked one of them why she's, what made her wear black gloves. And her answer was that my father told me that men can get wrong ideas. The word she used was ghalat khayal if they see my fingers and wrists. So he has told me to keep my fingers and wrists also covered at all times. Maulana Azad was definitely not anti-religion, as Shantaji pointed out, but let me quote him. What he said was that we need to reverse the ill effects of religious education by providing an understanding of religion as a means to broaden one's outlook. Being a Muslim myself, although I don't have good knowledge of Islam, but I do have a good enough knowledge of Islam, and sometimes it's okay to be good enough and not good. I decided to begin talking about religion and, and especially how women practice religion. So we talked about what it means to be a good Muslim. Do boys practice the religion differently? Are there stricter rules for girls? And most of them did not speak much because they were not used to sharing ideas much, but some did. And they said things like, लड़कों को इतनी छूट क्यों मिलती है, वो कहीं भी जा सकते हैं, हम क्यों नहीं जा सकते कहीं भी, हम अपने आप को इतना ढकते हैं, we practice Islam, even then we are not allowed to go out without fathers and brothers. I also learned in my discussions with them that there was instilled in their mind that the world is a very bad place. A fear of the public, the big bad world, is experienced by and cultivated in all women of all communities, perhaps all over the world. Anyone who read out Red Riding Hood's story to their daughters is guilty of doing that. But it is magnified by 1,000 times in the case of the Muslims. This was noted in the Sachar Committee report too. This paranoia about the other is extremely strong. There seems to be a huge trust deficit with everyone. Maybe in the last 8 years, this trust deficit is understandable. However, my dad tells me that he's been hearing about this Islam khatre mein hai kind of mentality in the Majlis-e-Mushawarat meetings that he's been attending in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. This real or perceived fear of the other is particularly harmful for women. It makes them withdraw into the safety of familiar dogma, like maybe attaching a very big significance to covering themselves up more and more with garments, staying at home, obedience to the patriarch, not being assertive with parents, not venturing out, giving up education if the school is even a short bus ride away, not being allowed to use public transport by themselves, study, meet friends, or just living a free life. I'm on the advisory board of a couple of non-profits working with primary school Muslim children. And I was doing a review with them last month. And we discovered while doing that review that until a few years ago, the hijab became a mandatory part of the school uniform from grade 2 onwards. We've always known that. I've always known that. But now it is part of the uniform in kindergarten. So it is mandatory for 2 or 3-year-old girls who go to these private, Muslim-run schools to wear a hijab. Coming back to the 18-year-olds, and what you have on the slide, which you can see is is artwork by this Arab artist. I forget her name, but you can look her up. This is called Mother, Daughter, and Doll. That's the name of this artwork. Coming back to the 18-year-olds, we talked in one of the group discussions about what do you really want from life. All of them wanted to study, they wanted to go out, and many of them said that they did not want to get married. So even though they were very innocent and uninformed, they knew that marriage is bad news for women. We began talking about rights of women in Islam, haqq-e-talaq, that Islam gives them the right to co-draft their nikah-nama. They did not know any of this. Nobody had ever told them this. They were such good practicing Muslims, but they barely knew anything about their rights as Muslims. In one of these centers, and I'm beginning to sum up now, we formed a batch of about 25 girls and told them, so I tried this experiment of learning from each other. We told them about women like Rosa Parks, Frida Kahlo, Malala Yousafzai, Jane Goodall. In Maulana Azad spirit, we are citizens of the world. So let's also talk about women from outside of the subcontinent. Malala, of course, is part of the subcontinent. I asked them to read more about these women on the internet. As I told you, in these centers, we provided them high-speed internet and laptops for them to use. And there was a lot of excitement in the room that day. They were reading in groups and they were, learning about other women, about these particular women. And I just asked them that, would you like to dress up like these women and we could do a photo shoot? They jumped at the idea. And I'd like to share some pictures of our dress up day. So here's this young woman whose face I had never seen before because she was fully covered, even though I had known her for 8 months before we did this, we had this dress up day. She chose to dress up as Rosa Parks. She borrowed her brother's coat and shirt, and she had her own white leggings. And then she had also read up so much about Rosa Parks. So we saw a little school van passing. And this girl and her friends, they stopped the school bus and she demanded that we photograph her inside the school bus because she said, Rosa Parks ji ka andolan to bus ke andar shuru hua tha. Those were her words. So, that's her photograph inside a school bus. Lots of girls chose to dress up like Malala because I think there is a comfort. You don't have to make too many changes to dress up like Malala. But still, these girls were in that full hijab, which, really covers, your entire face, not a strand of hair shows. So this was a little bit of dress up for them as well. And I have another picture, right? And we were doing this in their community. We were running around all over the mohalla doing this photo shoot. And here's Frida Kahlo. So if you can see, she's not only dressed up like Frida Kahlo, but she's tried to imbibe her spirit. And she also painted her brows in the middle. She joined them because Frida Kahlo had this unibrow. And I asked each of them to talk for 10 minutes about, the person they are representing today. And this young woman said that from today, I will never feel conscious about my facial hair or my eyebrows because, I've learned from Frida Kahlo that you've got to, love yourself as you are. Here's our Jane Goodall. So all this was created in a couple of days. I gave them about 2 days to think about this, and all this is done by themselves. There was no teacher helping them. So she decided to wear a pendant that Jane Goodall wears very often. Also, you can see the desire to, pose like the person they were representing. So here, I think she's trying to sort of copy this picture of Jane Goodall. She managed to get a toy by binoculars. So, these are some of the things we did, and they seemed really successful, and lots of energetic, discussions happened. And before concluding, I want to share some observations, as I told you, about the centers that were mixed, where we had both Hindu and Muslim girls. It was interesting to see that in some of the centers where we had Dalit girls, they were very aware of Baba Saheb Ambedkar's teachings, and they brought that insight into the class. I don't know what word to use for them, but it's something like radicalized. They were more radicalized in their approach. Some others had attended classes on patriarchy, gender justice, and they got that input into the class as well. The conversations became about building solidarities, about youth-related concerns, and youth-related challenges. If we truly want to achieve Maulana Azad's vision, the first thing we need to remove, and I know other speakers have said this before me today, the first thing we need to remove is segregation. Schools should be as diverse as possible. And if that diversity is not a reality today, we must insist on it. Perhaps if segregation can be eliminated, fear of the other might also get eliminated. It is very important for the youth to experience diversity and know people who live their lives in different ways and people who think differently. In a country like India, it is a sin to have colleges, schools, workplaces, centers, housing societies, and neighborhoods which do not reflect the diversity of the society that we live in. I think both Ambedkar and Azad would have agreed. Thank you so much for listening to me.